I'm writing this because I need to get it out somewhere. And honestly, I want people to know what happened. This was back around Thanksgiving and yeah, it still makes me furious when I think about it. I'm 24 now, been living on my own since then. And let me tell you how I ended up standing in the mud on a holiday while my family watched from inside. First, some background because it matters. My grandmother, Miles, basically raised me from age 6 to 16. My mom, Rosemary, was going through what she called her finding herself phase, which apparently meant leaving me with her mother while she dated a rotating cast of losers and worked random jobs 3 towns over. Miles didn't complain. She just did what needed doing and I loved her for it. She taught me how to fix things, how to handle money, how to be responsible. When I was 16, Mom decided she was ready to be a parent again and moved me back in with her. Miles lived 2 blocks away and I saw her almost every day still. Mom had my sisters, Tina and Antonia by then. They were 4 and 6 when I moved back in. Different dads, neither one stuck around. I helped raise those girls. I was the one who made sure they had breakfast before school, helped with homework, took them to the park on Saturdays. Mom worked at a warehouse distribution center, and her shifts were all over the place, so I picked up a lot of the slack. I didn't mind. Those girls are my sisters and I love them. When I turned 18, I started working full-time at a shipping facility while taking community college classes online. I paid rent to Mom, covered groceries half the time, kept the utilities in my name because Mom's credit was trashed, and the electric company wouldn't deal with her anymore after she'd let bills go to collections twice before. The internet was mine, the water bill was mine, the gas and electric were mine. I paid them. She gave me money for her share most months. Some months she didn't. And I covered it anyway because what was I going to do? Let my little sisters freeze or go without water? Then Shane showed up about 8 months ago. Mom met him at some bar. He moved in after 3 weeks. The guy was 42. Had this whole tough guy attitude. Worked construction when he felt like it. He didn't like me from day one. And the feeling was mutual. He'd make comments about me still living at home at my age. Called me a freeloader. Said I needed to stop hanging around and get my own place. This despite the fact that I was paying more bills than he was. Mom got different around him. She started smoking again after being quit for 2 years. Started drinking more. Stopped caring as much about what the girls needed. Miles noticed too. We'd talk about it when I'd stopped by her house. She'd say Mom was making the same mistakes as always, picking men over family. But Miles also said it wasn't her place to interfere, that Mom was a grown woman who'd make her own choices. The problems with Shane got worse. He'd forget to give Mom money for bills, then get mad when I'd ask her about her share. He started acting like he owned the place, rearranging furniture, throwing out my stuff, telling me what I could and couldn't do. I kept my mouth shut, mostly because I didn't want to make things harder for Mom or the girls. But man, it was getting old fast. About 6 weeks before Thanksgiving, Shane started really pushing for me to move out. He'd bring it up at dinner in front of the girls, talking about how I was taking up space they needed, how I should be independent by now. Mom would just sit there and not say anything. The girls would look at me with these worried faces and I'd tell them it was fine. Everything was fine. I started preparing. I'm not stupid. I could see where this was heading. I got a small apartment across town, signed the lease, started moving my important stuff over bit by bit. Work documents, my laptop, my good clothes, anything I actually cared about. I left the obvious stuff at Mom's place, the everyday things that would make it look like I still fully lived there. I didn't tell anyone, not even Miles. I just quietly got ready for whatever was coming. Thanksgiving Day. Mom invited Miles over because that's what we did every year. Big family dinner. I'd been up since 6 o'clock, helping cook the turkey, making sides, setting the table. The girls were excited, helping me put out the nice plates. Shane was in the living room watching football and drinking beer, yelling at the TV. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was mashing potatoes when Shane came into the kitchen. He told me he and Mom had been talking and they decided it was time for me to find my own place. After the holidays, I needed to be gone. I said, okay, I'd been expecting this. I'd start looking. That should have been the end of it. But Shane wasn't done. He started going off about how I'd been a burden. How I never contributed enough. How Mom deserved better than having her adult son living in her house. I reminded him that I paid half the bills and my name was on most of the utilities. He said that didn't matter. This wasn't my house. I was just a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. Mom walked in right then. I looked at her, waiting for her to say something, to tell Shane he was out of line. She didn't. She just stood there pulling a cigarette from her pack, watching us. So, I asked her directly, is this what she wanted? Did she want me gone? She said Shane had a point. I was 24 and it was time I stood on my own feet. I felt this cold clarity wash over me right then. Not anger yet, just this clear understanding of exactly who my mother was and what I actually meant to her. I said, fine, I'll pack and be out today. Shane laughed. Said, about time. Then he added something about how I'd been riding Mom's generosity long enough. And maybe now she could focus on her real family. Real family. Like I wasn't her son. Like I hadn't been taking care of his daughters while he sat on his backside watching TV. I went to my room and started throwing clothes into garbage bags. Not carefully. I didn't care anymore. I could hear Shane in the living room telling Mom she'd made the right choice, how they didn't need dead weight around. The girls came to my door crying, asking where I was going. I told them I had to leave, but I'd see them soon. I loved them. Tina was sobbing, asking if it was because of something they did. I told her, no, never. This had nothing to do with them. I carried 3 bags out to the living room. Shane was standing by the front door like he was guarding it. He said he'd help me move faster and grab 2 of my bags before I could stop him. Then he walked out the front door and threw them into the side yard. It had rained the night before. Everything was mud and wet leaves. My clothes spilled out into the dirt. I followed him outside. Shane was grinning. Told me if I was going to leave, I might as well take everything. He went back in and grabbed the 3rd bag, threw it on top of the others. Then he said, your daddy ran off because you're worthless. Now I see why. Guess bad blood runs in the family. I just stood there looking at my stuff in the mud. The neighbors across the street were watching from their front window. Mrs. Patterson and her husband. Everyone would know by morning that's how it worked in our town. Mom came out onto the porch, Miles right behind her. I looked at Miles, hoping maybe she'd say something. Tell Mom this was wrong. She didn't. She just stood there with her arms crossed, face blank. Mom lit her cigarette, took a drag, didn't meet my eyes. Tina and Antonia were crying at the window, their faces pressed against the glass. Shane stood next to Mom with his arm around her waist, looking proud of himself. I picked up my bags, shook off what mud I could. I looked at Mom and said, I love you. Remember that. She flinched but didn't respond. Shane told me to get going, so I started walking. The bus station was 3 miles away. I walked the whole way carrying wet garbage bags full of muddy clothes. Thanksgiving afternoon, families in their houses having dinner, and I was walking down the shoulder of the highway looking like a homeless person. I didn't care. I just kept walking, thinking about what I was going to do next. I had my apartment already. That wasn't a problem. I had my job, my bank account, my car was parked at a friend's house because the alternator was being replaced. I'd been preparing for this. I just hadn't expected it to happen quite like that, quite so publicly. But fine, they wanted me gone. I was gone. I spent Thanksgiving night in my new apartment eating delivery pizza and making lists. Lists of what I needed to do, what I needed to take care of, what needed to happen next. I wasn't sad anymore. I was just focused, cold and focused and absolutely certain about what came next. The next day, I went to the utility companies, every single one where my name was on the account. I showed my ID. I showed my new address and I requested service transfers, the electric, the gas, the water, the internet, all of it. I paid the final bills at the old address and started new accounts at my apartment. All perfectly legal, all perfectly within my rights since my name was on everything. I gave them 30 days notice as required. Scheduled the disconnections for late December. I didn't tell Mom. I didn't tell anyone. I just waited. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone in my apartment. I got a text from Tina on Christmas Eve asking where I was, saying she missed me. I told her I missed her too, but couldn't come over right now. She sent me a selfie of her and Antonia in front of their little tree. Both of them trying to smile but looking sad. That almost broke me. But I stayed focused on what needed doing. Late December, the utilities shut off. I know because exactly 2 days later, my phone started ringing. Mom's number. I didn't answer. She called 6 times that first day. Then texts started coming in asking why the power was off, why the internet wasn't working, why the water had stopped. I didn't respond. Shane called next, left me a message saying I better fix whatever I'd done. This wasn't funny. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. More calls, more texts. Mom saying the utility companies told her the account holder had transferred service, that I needed to call them back and fix this. I didn't respond. Then Miles called. She said Mom was at her house with the girls. They didn't have heat or water. What had I done? I told her I'd transferred the utilities that were in my name to my new address. Same as anyone would when they moved. She said I was being cruel. Those little girls were suffering. I said maybe Mom should have thought about that before she let her boyfriend throw my clothes in the mud on Thanksgiving. Miles got quiet, then told me to grow up and hung up. I blocked all their numbers after that. I wasn't going to sit there and read messages about how I was the bad guy, how I was hurting my sisters, how I needed to fix this. They wanted me gone. I was gone. They wanted nothing to do with me. They got nothing from me. Simple as that. I focused on work, picked up extra shifts, started saving more money. My apartment was quiet and mine, and nobody told me what to do or called me worthless or made me feel like I didn't belong. It was exactly what I needed. 61 days after I left, I got a message request on Facebook from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was from Mom. She'd apparently gotten a new phone or was using someone else's to contact me since I'd blocked her. The message said, "How did you do this? Undo it, please. We can't survive this. Whatever you did, stop it now. I'm your mother. Please make it end." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I smiled, screenshot it, saved it to a folder on my laptop, and went back to watching TV. They wanted me gone. They got their wish. And now they were learning exactly how much I'd actually been holding their lives together. Alright, so the response to my first post was wild. A lot of you said I should stand my ground. Some said I was being too harsh on my sisters. And yeah, I hear you on that second part. It eats at me every day. But let me tell you what's happened since that Facebook message because it got so much messier. I didn't respond to Mom's message. I know a lot of you said I should at least talk to her, but honestly, I wasn't ready and I didn't owe her anything. She made her choice on Thanksgiving, let Shane humiliate me in front of the whole family and the neighbors, and now she wanted me to fix her problems. Not happening. But Mom wasn't going to just leave it alone. 3 days after that Facebook message, she showed up at my apartment. I was getting ready for work around 6 o'clock in the morning and there was pounding on my door. Aggressive pounding. The kind that makes you think someone's in trouble. I looked through the peephole and there she was with Shane right behind her. I opened the door but kept the chain lock on. Mom looked terrible, I'll be honest. Hair pulled back, messy, no makeup, wearing the same jacket she'd had on at Thanksgiving. She started talking immediately, saying, "We needed to discuss this situation. I couldn't just leave them without utilities. The girls were suffering." Shane was standing there with his arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. I told them through the crack in the door that I'd transferred services in my name to my new residence, same as anyone does when they move. Mom said I knew that would leave them with nothing. I'd done it on purpose to hurt them. I said, yeah, I'd done it on purpose, just like Shane purposely threw my belongings in the mud on purpose. Just like she purposely stood there smoking and watching it happen. Shane pushed forward, then told me to stop being a little punk and turn the utilities back on. I said I couldn't. They were at my apartment now under contract. If he wanted utilities at Mom's place, he could get them in his name. He said he'd already tried. They wanted a deposit he didn't have. Mom said she tried too, but her credit was flagged from the old unpaid bills. Here's where it got interesting. Shane started explaining like I was stupid that they needed me to call the utility companies and transfer everything back. I asked why I would do that. He said because they were family. Because it was the right thing to do. Because Mom had raised me and I owed her. I looked at Mom when he said that last part. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I told them no. Just flat out no. Mom started crying, saying I was killing them. They'd been staying at Miles's house but couldn't do that forever. The girls needed stability. I said maybe she should have thought about stability before choosing her boyfriend over her son. Shane called me selfish. I laughed in his face and closed the door. They stayed out there for another 10 minutes pounding and yelling. My neighbors definitely heard everything. Eventually they left. I went to work, put in my shift, came home to find a note taped to my door. Mom's handwriting. It said they needed to work this out. Could I please meet her at the diner on Oak Street on Saturday at noon? Just her. No shoot. I thought about it for 2 days. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. But another part, the part that remembered Mom before all this mess, before Shane, that part said I should at least hear her out. So, Saturday at noon, I drove to the diner. Mom was already there in a corner booth. She looked worse than she had at my apartment. She'd lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes. When I sat down, she immediately started talking about how sorry she was, how things had gotten out of hand, how she never meant for Thanksgiving to happen like that. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt, just sat there drinking coffee and listening to her make excuses. She said Shane had been under a lot of stress. He'd been struggling with work. He sometimes said things he didn't mean when he was drinking. She said she should have defended me, but she'd been caught off guard. Didn't know what to say. She said the girls missed me terribly. Tina cried every night asking when I was coming home. That part got to me. I won't lie. Those girls didn't deserve any of this. But I also knew Mom was using them, trying to manipulate me through my feelings for my sisters. Classic move. I asked her what she wanted from me specifically. She said she needed the utilities back on. They couldn't live at Miles's house much longer. Miles was making comments about them being burdens. I said, that's between you and Miles. Mom said I was the only one who could fix this. I had good credit. The utility companies would work with me. I asked if Shane was planning to apologize for what he said, for throwing my stuff in the mud, for calling me worthless. Mom got uncomfortable. Said Shane had his pride. He didn't apologize easily, but he felt bad about it. I said, so that's a no. Then she said, couldn't I just be the bigger person here? Be the bigger person. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Like I was the one who needed to fix my behavior. I told her I'd think about it. She grabbed my hand across the table, said, please. She was begging me. They had nowhere else to turn. The desperation in her voice was real. I could tell she'd exhausted every other option. But I also noticed she hadn't said she was leaving Shane. Hadn't said she'd made a mistake choosing him over me. Hadn't actually taken responsibility for anything. I pulled my hand back and told her I'd be in touch. I left cash for my coffee and walked out. She called after me, but I kept going. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, things have escalated in ways I didn't expect. Miles called me last week, told me Mom and Shane and the girls had officially moved into her house. She said it was temporary until they figured things out, but I could hear the frustration in her voice. She said I'd created this mess and I needed to fix it. I told Miles the same thing I told everyone else. I moved out like they wanted. I took my utilities with me like anyone would. This wasn't my problem to fix. Miles said I was being vindictive and cruel. Those girls deserved better. I said, yeah, they did. They deserved a mother who put them first and a grandmother who stood up for what was right instead of staying silent while I got humiliated. Miles got mad then. She said I didn't understand how hard Mom's life had been. How much she'd struggled as a single mother, how Shane made her happy, even if he had rough edges. I said Shane was a controlling jerk who wanted me gone so he could have complete control over Mom and the household. Miles told me I was being paranoid. But here's what I'd figured out. Remember how I said Shane was always weird about money, always forgetting to contribute to bills? I'd been thinking about that pattern. Shane moved in, immediately started pushing me out. Wanted all the utilities and finances in Mom's name or his name. Wanted me gone entirely. Guy didn't want to pay bills himself, but he didn't want me paying them either because that gave me some say in the household. He wanted Mom completely dependent on him financially and emotionally. Classic control move. With me there paying half of everything and having my name on accounts, he couldn't fully isolate her. That's why he pushed so hard to get me out. That's why he made Thanksgiving so ugly he knew I wouldn't come back. He wanted Mom vulnerable and alone except for him. I tried to explain this to Miles on the phone. She said I was reading too much into things. Shane just wanted his own space with his girlfriend. I said he's 42, living rent-free in his girlfriend's house. He's not some young guy needing independence. Miles said I was being disrespectful and hung up. 2 days after that conversation, I got a message from Mom saying Miles had given them a 30-day notice. Miles wanted them out by the end of February. Mom said they'd been looking for apartments but couldn't find anything they could afford without utilities already included, and those places wanted credit checks they couldn't pass. She said they were going to end up homeless. Was that what I wanted? I didn't respond, but I did start seeing more clearly how Shane was handling this situation. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He wasn't out looking for places they could afford or trying to get better paying work. He was sitting back letting Mom panic and reach out to me, using her as the go-between. He was making her do all the emotional labor while he played the victim. Yesterday, Mom showed up at my work. I work at a shipping facility. She apparently asked around until someone told her which location I was at. Security called me up front because there was a woman asking for me. I went out and there she was in the lobby. She looked worse than at the diner. She definitely lost more weight. Her clothes hung on her. She said Miles was serious about the 30 days. They had 3 weeks left and nowhere to go. She said Shane had been applying for apartments but kept getting rejected. She said the girls were scared and acting out at school. Antonia had gotten in a fight and Tina had started wetting the bed again. I asked where Shane was right now. She said he was out looking at a trailer park that might have space. I asked if he was actually looking or if he was at a bar. She got defensive. Said he was trying his best. I said his best involves throwing people's belongings in mud and calling them worthless, apparently. Mom started crying right there in my work lobby. She said she'd made mistakes. She knew that she'd chosen wrong. But please, couldn't I help just for the girl's sake? She said I could come back home. We could all work it out, be a family again, come back home like the house was still home, like I'd want to live with Shane again, like anything could go back to how it was. I told her there was no going back. I told her she'd made her choice on Thanksgiving and now she had to live with it. I told her to leave because I had to get back to work. She grabbed my arm, begging, saying she'd do anything. I pulled away and walked back into the warehouse. Security had to escort her out. My supervisor asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. I said I was fine, just family drama, nothing I couldn't handle. He nodded, but I could tell he was concerned. Great. Now, my personal life was affecting my professional reputation. I got home that night to find Shane sitting on the stairs leading up to my apartment. He stood up when he saw me, blocked my way. He said we needed to talk man to man. I said we had nothing to discuss. He said I was destroying his family and I needed to make this right. His family, not our family or Mom's family. His family like he owned them. I told him to move. He didn't. He started going on about how I was being petty. How real men didn't hold grudges. How he'd said some things he didn't mean, but that was months ago and I needed to get over it. He said Mom was falling apart and it was my fault. I asked him if he'd gotten a job yet. He said he was working construction when there was work. I asked if he'd saved any money for a deposit on an apartment. He said money was tight. I asked if he'd apologized to Mom for getting them into this situation. He said he hadn't gotten them into anything. I had. The lack of accountability was stunning. This guy had contributed nothing, treated me like garbage, pushed me out, and now blamed me for the consequences of his own actions. And he genuinely seemed to believe he was the victim here. I told him one more time to move. He said, or what was I going to fight him? I pulled out my phone and said, no, I was going to call the police for trespassing. He backed off, then called me a coward. Said I was hiding behind lawyers and cops instead of being a man. I went up to my apartment and locked the door. So, that's where things stand now. Mom's family is getting kicked out of Miles's place in 3 weeks. They can't get utilities in their names. They can't pass credit checks for apartments. Shane won't take responsibility or actually fix anything. Mom keeps begging me to save them. And me, I'm standing firm. They wanted me gone. I'm gone. They wanted nothing to do with me. They're getting nothing from me. A lot of you said in the comments that actions have consequences. And yeah, they absolutely do. But I'm not going to pretend this feels good. Knowing my little sisters are suffering eats at me constantly. I lie awake thinking about Tina wetting the bed and Antonia fighting at school. They're 8 and 10 years old. They don't deserve any of this. At the same time, what's the alternative? I go back. I fix everything. I'm the family doormat again while Shane treats me like garbage. I reward Mom for choosing him over me. I teach my sisters that it's okay to let people walk all over you as long as they're family. I don't know. I really don't. All I know is I'm exhausted and angry, and this whole situation keeps getting worse, and I can't see any way it ends well for anyone. This is going to be long because the last 2 weeks have been absolutely insane. For everyone who said the situation would eventually resolve itself, you were wrong. It's gotten so much worse in ways I never expected. First, the deadline at Miles's house came and went. I know because 3 days after they were supposed to be out, Miles called me screaming. Actually screaming, not just yelling. She said Mom and Shane and the girls were still in her house. They'd promised they were leaving, but then moving day came and they had nowhere to go, so they just stayed. Miles said she'd told them they had to leave by 6 o'clock that evening or she was calling the police. I asked if she actually called the police. She said no because what was she supposed to do? Have her daughter and granddaughters arrested. She said this was my fault for creating the situation in the first place. I needed to fix it immediately. I told her I didn't create anything. I just stopped enabling it. She called me heartless and hung up. That same day, I got a message from Mom saying Miles had changed the locks while they were out getting groceries. Just straight up locked them out with all their stuff still inside. Mom said Miles left a note on the door saying their belongings would be on the curb the next morning and they needed to figure out somewhere else to stay. Mom asked if they could stay with me for a few days while Shane figured things out. I didn't respond. The audacity of even asking after everything that happened was stunning. But I'll admit, I sat there in my apartment thinking about those girls having nowhere to sleep, and it gutted me. 8 and 10 years old getting bounced around because the adults in their lives couldn't get it together. The next evening I was at the grocery store, the big one on Route 9, and I ran into Mrs. Patterson from our old street. She was in the produce section and spotted me before I could avoid her. She came right up and started talking about how she'd heard what happened with Mom's family, how the whole neighborhood knew they were having troubles, how it was such a shame. I was trying to be polite and extract myself when she said she'd seen them earlier that day. Mom, Shane, and the girls had been parked in Shane's truck outside the house on our old street for hours. Mrs. Patterson said they'd been sitting there from around noon until almost dark, just parked across from the house like they were waiting for something. The girls had been in the back seat doing homework in a truck in February. Mrs. Patterson asked if I knew they were living in Shane's truck now. I said I didn't know that. She said, well, everyone on the street was talking about it. Some people felt bad, but others thought it was inappropriate to have children living in a vehicle parked on a residential street. She said someone had called the authorities to do a welfare check. I thanked her for the information and got out of there. I sat in my car in the parking lot trying to process what I just heard. My little sisters were living in a truck, doing homework in a truck, sleeping in a truck in February in our climate where it still got down to the 30s at night. I drove past our old street on my way home. Shane's truck was parked right where Mrs. Patterson said across from Mom's house. I could see shapes inside. Looked like they had blankets hung up in the windows for privacy. The house itself was dark. No one had moved in yet. I kept driving. When I got home, there were 5 missed calls from Mom and a text saying they desperately needed to talk to me. It was an emergency. I called her back. She answered on the first ring. Sounded panicked. She said a social worker had shown up and talked to them about the girls' living situation. Had interviewed Tina and Antonia separately. The social worker said living in a vehicle wasn't appropriate for children, and they needed to secure stable housing within a week or the girls would be removed and placed in foster care. 1 week, 7 days to find housing or lose custody of my sisters. Mom was crying, saying this couldn't happen. She couldn't lose her babies. I had to help them. I asked where Shane was. She said he was in the truck with the girls. They were giving Mom privacy to make phone calls. I asked what Shane's plan was. She said he was trying. He'd applied for every apartment in a 30-mile radius, but no one would rent to them without proof of utilities and deposits they couldn't afford. I asked if she'd considered leaving Shane, just flat out asked her if she'd thought about the fact that maybe her best option for keeping her daughters was to leave the guy who'd created this whole mess in the first place. She got quiet, then said it wasn't that simple. Shane didn't have anywhere else to go either. She couldn't just abandon him. There was. She'd choose him again. Even now, even with her daughters about to be taken away, she'd choose Shane over doing what needed to be done. I told her I had to go. She begged me to wait, to please think about helping them. I hung up. I spent that whole night thinking about those girls, about Tina, who used to climb into my lap during movies and fall asleep. About Antonia, who would bring me her homework problems to solve together. About them in the back of a cold truck doing homework by flashlight. About them being taken by CPS and put into foster care with strangers. The next morning, I called Mom back. I said I'd make her a one-time offer. I would co-sign for an apartment for her and the girls only if she left Shane. I'd help with the utility deposits. I'd help get them set up, but Shane couldn't be part of it. She needed to choose between her boyfriend and her children. Mom was silent for a long time. Then she asked what Shane was supposed to do. I said I didn't care what Shane did. He was a grown man who could figure out his own life. She said he had no family, nowhere to go. He'd end up homeless. I said he should have thought about that before he threw my clothes in the mud and called me worthless. She said I was asking her to choose. It wasn't fair. I said no. She already chose Shane on Thanksgiving. I was just asking if she was ready to make a different choice now. She said she needed to talk to Shane about it. I told her she had until end of business that day to decide. After that, my offer expired. 3 hours later, Shane called me. Not Mom. Shane. He said we needed to meet in person. There were things I didn't understand about the situation. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a pizza place near the highway, one of those casual places with arcade games and loud families everywhere. Shane showed up alone. He looked rough, hadn't shaved in days, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in the week before. He ordered a beer and started talking before I could say anything. He said I had the wrong idea about him. He wasn't the bad guy here. He said he loved Mom and the girls. He was trying to make a family work. I was the one making everything difficult. I asked him how I was making anything difficult. He said by refusing to help, by cutting off the utilities, by turning everyone against him. He said if I just transferred the services back or co-signed for them as a family, none of this would be happening. He said I was using my financial position to control the situation and punish him for one mistake. One mistake. That's what he called Thanksgiving. One mistake. I told him Thanksgiving wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. He chose to disrespect me. Mom chose to allow it. And now they were dealing with the consequences. Shane said I was being self-righteous, acting like I was better than everyone else. He said I'd always been judgmental of Mom's choices. Always thought I was smarter than her. That's why she'd sent me to live with Miles in the first place. That got my attention. I asked him what he meant by that. Shane said Mom had told him all about how difficult I was as a kid, how I'd been disrespectful and hard to handle, how she'd needed a break. He said she'd confided in him about how I'd always tried to control things in the house, make decisions that weren't mine to make. I just stared at him. That was the story Mom had told him, that she'd sent me away because I was difficult, not because she was chasing men and couldn't be bothered to parent. She'd rewritten the entire history to make herself the victim and me the problem child. Shane kept talking, saying he understood now why Mom and I had such a strained relationship. It made sense given what I'd been like as a kid. He said he was trying to help Mom move past my negative influence, but I kept inserting myself and causing drama. He said the best thing I could do for Mom was step back completely and let her live her life. I asked him if that's what Mom really wanted. He said yes. She'd said it multiple times. She just felt guilty about cutting me off because of some misplaced sense of maternal obligation. He said she'd be happier without me constantly judging her choices and making her feel inadequate. I stood up to leave. Shane grabbed my wrist, told me to sit back down. We weren't done talking. I pulled my arm away and told him we were absolutely done. He said if I walked away now, I'd regret it. I'd lose my sisters forever. I said if they got taken by CPS because Mom chose a deadbeat over her children. That was on Mom and him, not me. I left. Shane followed me out to the parking lot yelling about how I was destroying a family. How I'd never understand what real love and sacrifice meant. I got in my car and drove away while he was still yelling. I called Mom as soon as I got home. I asked her if she'd told Shane I was a difficult kid, if that's why she'd sent me to Miles. She was quiet for a minute, then said she might have mentioned I'd been going through a phase, but Shane had misunderstood the context. I asked her flat out if she wanted me in her life or not. She said, of course, she wanted me in her life. I was her son. I said, then why was her boyfriend telling me she'd be happier without me? She said Shane was stressed and said things he didn't mean. I shouldn't take it personally. I told her my offer stood, but the deadline had passed. If she wanted to take me up on it, she'd have to ask. She hasn't called back. It's been 4 days. The 1-week deadline from the social worker is almost up. I checked our old street again yesterday. The truck was still there, but moved to a different spot down the block. I didn't stop. Miles called me this morning. She said Mom had called her asking for help getting the girls' stuff that was still in Miles's garage. Miles said she'd told Mom she could come get it today between 2 and 4. No Shane allowed. She asked if I'd be there to help move things. I said no. Miles said I was letting anger make me cruel. Those little girls were going to lose everything, including their mother, because I refused to be the bigger person. I said those little girls were going to lose their mother because their mother chose a deadbeat boyfriend over her children's well-being. Miles said I was twisting things to make myself feel better about abandoning my family. I told Miles she was the one who'd abandoned principles on Thanksgiving by standing there silent while Shane humiliated me. I told her she'd had a chance to be the adult, to tell Mom she was making a terrible choice, to defend me or at least speak up. She'd done nothing. Miles said that wasn't her place. She couldn't tell Mom how to live her life. I said then she couldn't tell me how to live mine either. We haven't spoken since. I'm sitting here in my apartment, which is warm and quiet and mine. And somewhere out there, my little sisters are in a truck waiting to find out if they're going into foster care. And I can't fix it without enabling the exact behavior that got us here in the first place. People keep telling me this isn't my fault, that I'm not responsible for Mom's choices. But knowing that doesn't make me feel any better when I think about Tina and Antonia scared and confused about why their lives are falling apart. The social worker's deadline is in 2 days. I don't know what happens after that. I don't know if Mom's going to make a choice or if she's just going to let everything collapse around her while Shane tells her it's all my fault. All I know is I did everything right. I worked hard. I paid bills. I helped raise my sisters, that I was responsible and reliable. And I'm the one being called cruel for refusing to rescue people who treated me like garbage. That I guess we'll see how this plays out. I'll update again when something changes, because at this point, something has to give. This is it. The conclusion to this mess. And for everyone who's been following along, yeah, it went exactly as complicated and messy as you'd expect. The CPS deadline came and went. Let me tell you what happened, because it was a series of events that unfolded over about 36 hours, and I'm still processing all of it. The day before the deadline, I was at work when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was the social worker handling my sister's case. She introduced herself as Miss Rodriguez. Said she'd gotten my contact information from the school records, where I was still listed as an emergency contact for both girls. She asked if I was aware of the situation with my mother and sisters. I said, yes, I was aware. She asked if I'd be willing to meet with her briefly to discuss options. I asked what kind of options. She said she couldn't discuss specifics over the phone, but it concerned placement for the minors if the current living situation wasn't resolved by the deadline. I met her at a coffee shop that afternoon. Miss Rodriguez was maybe 40, professional, direct. She laid out the situation clearly. Mom and Shane were living in a vehicle with 2 minor children. This wasn't acceptable. The deadline was the next day at 5. If stable housing wasn't secured by then, The girls would be removed and placed in emergency foster care while the case was evaluated. I asked why she was telling me this. She said, because I was listed as emergency contact, I had the option to request kinship placement. Basically, if I was willing and able to provide housing for my sisters, they could be placed with me instead of going to strangers. It would require a home visit, background check, and I'd need to attend some meetings. But it was an option. I sat there trying to wrap my head around it. Take in my sisters, become their guardian while Mom got her life together. I asked how long that would be for. She said it depended on how quickly Mom secured stable housing and completed certain requirements. Could be weeks or months. I asked if Mom knew she'd contacted me. She said yes. She'd informed Mom of all options available. I told her I needed to think about it. She said she needed an answer by noon the next day if I was going to be considered. She gave me her card and left. I drove around for hours after that meeting. Just drove through town thinking about what it would mean to take in Tina and Antonia. My apartment was a one-bedroom. I'd need to move. I'd need to adjust my work schedule. I'd need to become basically a parent overnight to two traumatized kids. And I'd be doing it because Mom had failed them because she'd chosen Shane over her daughter's well-being. But they were my sisters. I'd helped raise them once already. The thought of them going to strangers, being separated, maybe being in the system, that killed me. Around 9 that night, Mom called. She'd gotten a new phone number, probably borrowed someone's phone to set it up. She asked if I'd met with the social worker. I said yes. She asked what I'd decided. I said I hadn't decided anything yet. She started crying, saying she knew she'd messed up everything. She knew I had every right to hate her, but please would I take the girls, at least temporarily. She couldn't bear the thought of them with strangers. I asked her what she was planning to do. She said she'd been trying to find a room to rent anywhere that would take her, but everywhere required deposits and references she didn't have. She said Shane was trying to line up work that would give him enough for a deposit. I asked if she'd considered my original offer about leaving Shane. She got quiet. Then she said she'd tried to talk to Shane about it, about them separating so she could take the girls somewhere safe. He'd gotten angry. Said she was abandoning him when he needed her most. Accused her of choosing me over him. She said it had turned into a huge fight in the truck with the girls right there hearing everything. She said Shane had said if she left him, he'd make sure everyone knew she was an unfit mother who'd chosen her son over her own daughters. The manipulation was stunning. Shane had flipped the entire script, made leaving him into abandoning her children somehow. And Mom had bought it. She said she didn't know what to do anymore. Everything was falling apart and Shane kept saying it was all my fault for refusing to help them. I told her I'd think about taking the girls. She asked what she needed to do to make that happen. I said she needed to not interfere, not try to use them to guilt me into helping her and Shane, and accept that if I did this, it was for Tina and Antonia, not for her. She agreed to whatever I wanted. I called Miss Rodriguez first thing the next morning. I said I'd take the girls if needed. She said she'd fast-track the home visit and paperwork. She came to my apartment at 10 o'clock, looked around, asked me questions about my job, my income, my background. She said my apartment was too small for 3 people long-term, but would work temporarily. She'd approve emergency placement and we'd work out the details for something bigger. At 3 that afternoon, Miss Rodriguez called and said she was with Mom and the girls at the social services office downtown. Could I come get them? Just like that. Come get your sisters. They're yours now. I drove to the office. Mom was in the waiting room with Tina and Antonia. Both girls had backpacks and looked terrified. Shane wasn't there. Mom looked worse than I'd ever seen her, like she'd aged 10 years in 2 months. Miss Rodriguez had me sign a stack of papers. Explained I was now temporary kinship guardian. There would be a court date in 2 weeks to formalize things. The girls ran to me when Miss Rodriguez said they were leaving with me. Tina was crying. Antonia was trying to be brave, but I could see she was scared. I hugged them both, told them everything was going to be okay. Mom stood up like she wanted to hug them, too, but I stepped between them. I told Mom she could call Miss Rodriguez to arrange supervised visits once things were settled. Mom started crying harder. Said she was so sorry she'd never meant for any of this to happen. I said I knew she hadn't meant it. She never meant anything. That was the problem. I took the girl's hands and walked out. Shane was in the parking lot. Of course he was. He was leaning against his truck smoking. Saw us coming out. He walked toward us and I put the girls behind me. He said, "This was what you wanted all along, wasn't it? To take Mom's kids away from her." I told him to back off. He said I'd destroyed his family, turned Mom against him, stolen her children. Miss Rodriguez had followed us out. She told Shane he needed to leave the property immediately. Shane ignored her, kept talking to me about how I'd systematically ruined everything out of spite. I got the girls in my car and locked the doors. Shane came up to my window, banging on it, yelling about how this wasn't over. Security came over then. Miss Rodriguez must have called them. They escorted Shane back to his truck and told him to leave. He did, but not before yelling across the parking lot that I'd regret this. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. The girls sat in the back seat holding hands, not saying anything. When we got inside, I showed them where they'd sleep, the bathroom, where I'd cleared space in the kitchen for their stuff. Tina asked if they were going to live with me forever now. I said for now until Mom got things figured out. Antonia asked if Shane was coming with Mom when she got things figured out. I said I didn't know. She said good because she didn't like Shane. He was mean to me and made Mom cry. That was the first time either of them had said anything negative about Shane directly to me. That was 3 weeks ago. The girls are enrolled in school near my apartment. I moved to a 2-bedroom place last week. The rent is higher, but I can manage it. They're adjusting slowly. Tina still has nightmares sometimes. Antonia acts out when she's stressed. We're figuring it out. Mom has called exactly twice. Both times through Miss Rodriguez's office because I blocked her new number. She wanted to arrange visits. Miss Rodriguez said Mom would need to demonstrate stable housing first. Mom's still in the truck with Shane as far as I know. Still hasn't found anywhere to go. Miles called once. She said I'd won. Was I happy now? I'd gotten what I wanted. I said I didn't want any of this. I'd wanted my family to act like family, but that ship had sailed on Thanksgiving. She said Mom was devastated. The girls were her whole life. I said if that were true, she would have made different choices. Miles hung up. The court date is next week. Miss Rodriguez said it's likely I'll retain guardianship for at least 6 months while Mom works on her case plan, which includes securing stable housing, completing parenting classes, and regular supervised visits. Shane isn't allowed at the visits. Mom's already objecting to that requirement, saying she and Shane are a package deal. Miss Rodriguez told her she needs to decide what her priorities are. I ran into Mrs. Patterson at the store again last week. She asked how the girls were doing. Said she'd heard through the neighborhood gossip that they were living with me now. She said, "Good for you. Stepping up when Mom couldn't." She said Shane's truck hasn't been on our old street in over a week. She thinks they found somewhere else to park. Or maybe they'd finally split up. I don't know if Mom and Shane are still together. I don't particularly care anymore. What I care about is that Tina got a B on her spelling test yesterday. And Antonia laughed at something funny I said during dinner. What I care about is that they have a warm place to sleep and food in the fridge and someone who puts them first. Do I still think about that day on Thanksgiving every single day? Do I still think about Mom watching Shane throw my stuff in the mud and saying nothing? Absolutely. Am I angry? Beyond angry. I'm furious that it came to this. That Mom's choices led to her own children being removed. That I'm 24 years old raising 2 kids because my mother couldn't prioritize them over a deadbeat boyfriend. But I'm also clear-eyed about everything now. I see Mom for exactly who she is. Someone who makes terrible choices and then expects other people to fix the consequences. I see Shane for what he is, a manipulative user who isolated Mom and destroyed what was left of our family. I see Miles for what she is, an enabler who stood by and watched it all happen. And I see myself clearly too. I'm the one who had to become the adult. I'm the one who had to set boundaries and stick to them even when it was hard. I'm the one who had to watch my sisters suffer before I could help them. I'm the one living with the consequences of everyone else's choices. Some people have messaged saying I should forgive Mom, that family is family, that everyone makes mistakes. Here's the thing. I don't owe anyone forgiveness. I don't owe anyone reconciliation. What I owe is to my sisters to give them stability and safety and a chance at a normal childhood after everything that's happened. Mom made her choice on Thanksgiving. She chose Shane. She chose to stand there and let him humiliate me. She chose to tell him I was a difficult kid instead of admitting her own failures. She chose him again and again, even when it meant losing her daughters. Those were her choices. I'm living with mine. The girls asked me yesterday if Mom loves them. I said yes, Mom loves them. She's just not good at making the right choices. Tina asked if Mom loves Shane more than them. I didn't know what to say to that. I settled on telling her that sometimes adults make mistakes and we have to deal with the results. I love you. Remember that. That's what I told Mom standing in the mud on Thanksgiving. I meant it then. I still mean it now. But love doesn't mean enabling. It doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean sacrificing yourself or innocent kids for someone who refuses to change. So that's where this story ends. I've got custody of my sisters. Mom's still with Shane trying to get her life together enough to get supervised visits. Miles has stopped calling. Shane is out there somewhere probably telling anyone who will listen that I destroyed his family. And me, I'm tired. I'm angry. I'm stressed about money and parenting and court dates. But I'm also sleeping okay at night because I know I did the right thing. I set boundaries. I held firm. I protected my sisters when no one else would. That's all any of us can do really. Make our choices and live with them. Mom made hers. Shane made his. Miles made hers. And I made mine. I chose my sisters. I chose my self-respect. I chose to stop enabling toxic behavior.